Today on the John Ankerberg Show, where did we come from? How did we get here? What brought us into existence? In most high schools and colleges, Charles Darwin's theory of evolution is presented as an established fact of science rather than a theory. But today, many leading scientists in their peer-reviewed literature are rejecting Darwin's theory for many reasons. One of the most important being the Cambrian explosion of animals, where complex, fully formed animals suddenly just appeared in the fossil record, with no prior ancestors before them. Why do some scientists believe that these animals present compelling evidence of an all-powerful designing intelligence in the history of life? My guest today is Dr. Stephen Meyer, who received his PhD in the philosophy of science from Cambridge University, as the author of the best-selling book, Darwin's Doubt. We invite you to join us. Welcome to our program. I'm John Ankerberg. Thanks for joining me. Our topic is, why are many scientists today rejecting the standard textbook theory of evolution, known as neo-Darwinism, that we all learn in high school and college textbooks? And where did the problems with contemporary evolutionary theory begin? For the last few weeks, we've been looking at the theory of evolution and the scientific problems confronting it with scientist and philosopher Dr. Stephen Meyer. Dr. Meyer is a former geophysicist who received his PhD in the philosophy of science from Cambridge University. And he's written two best-selling books, Signature in the Cell and Darwin's Doubt. In Darwin's Doubt, Dr. Meyer tells how Darwin himself doubted the ability of his own theory to explain a crucial piece of evidence, and how that doubt has grown up to create a major crisis in evolutionary thinking today. Darwin was troubled by a major event in the history of life known as the Cambrian explosion, in which the first major groups of animals appeared abruptly in the fossil record. And Dr. Meyer, we're glad that you're here, and I want to begin today with a clip from Illustra Media's beautiful documentary movie, Darwin's Dilemma. This clip's going to tell you a little bit more about Dr. Stephen Meyer and the theory of intelligent design, and begin to present the positive scientific evidence that supports this new alternative view to neo-Darwinism. I want you to listen.
If the Darwinian mechanism cannot explain the origin of the information necessary to produce the Cambrian animals, is there any other cause that can? For more than 20 years, Stephen Meyer has explored this fundamental mystery. In August 2004, Meyer published several of his conclusions in a peer-reviewed journal affiliated with the Smithsonian Institution. His essay triggered a firestorm of controversy that jeopardized the career of the journal's editor, evolutionary biologist Richard Sternberg. But why did a technical paper on the origin of animal body plans evoke such heated response?
For many people, the problem with my paper was simply the conclusion. I not only argued that the Darwinian mechanism could not explain the origin of the new form and information that arises in the Cambrian, but I also argued that there were critical features of that explosion that pointed to the reality of a designing intelligence in the history of life.
Since his years as a graduate student at Cambridge University, Meyer has worked to develop a scientific case for intelligent design. A case based on a standard method of reasoning used by both Darwin and the famed 19th century geologist Charles Lyell. Lyell insisted that the best explanation for an event in the remote past was a cause known from our experience to produce it. A presently acting cause, one now in operation.
The present is the key to the past. That was Lyell's dictum. It's standard historical scientific methodology. If you're trying to reconstruct what happened in the remote past, we should let our present experience of cause and effect guide our search for the best explanation.
This reasoning helped focus Meyer's conclusions about the origin of information.
The light came on for me because I realized it's not that hard. What you're looking for are causes which are known to produce the kinds of effects you're trying to explain. I asked myself the question, what is the cause now in operation that produces new information, whether it's digital code or whether it's hierarchical information in the form of a blueprint? Where does that kind of information come from? Well, we know from our experience, from our uniform and repeated experience, which is the basis of all scientific reasoning about the past, that information always comes from an intelligent source. So when we find information in the Cambrian animals, when we realize that large infusions of new information are required to build those animals, the most natural thing, the most logical thing to conclude is that those animals owe their origin to an intelligent source, that the information required to build them, in turn, must have come from an intelligence.
Dr. Meyer, you have played a leading role in developing and formulating the scientific case for intelligent design. And I want you to tell the folks your story. How did this come about?
Well, in the mid-'80s, I was a young scientist and I was working for an oil company as a geophysicist. And I was working in seismic processing, which was an early form of information technology. And a conference came to town in Dallas, where I was working at the time, that was just absolutely fascinating to me. I'd long been interested in the big issues in science, the intersection of science and philosophy. The conference discussed three big questions: the origin of the universe, the origin of life, and the origin and nature of human consciousness. At the conference, there was a scientist there named Charles Thaxton, who had just written a major book on the question of the origin of the very first life. It was called The Mystery of Life's Origin, and he showed that this was an unsolved problem in modern biology, and that there was no chemical evolutionary theory that explained how we got from the chemicals in the prebiotic soup to the first living cell. And the key problem that he focused on, that many of the other scientists on the panel acknowledged, was the problem of the origin of information, the problem of the origin of the genetic information stored in DNA that you need to build the first cell. Well, I was fascinated with this, and ended up getting to know Thaxton, was introduced at the conference, and started to visit with him after work. He had, in the epilogue to his book, The Mystery of Life's Origin, floated an idea that he called, well, he didn't really have a name for it. He said that there was something about the information-bearing properties of DNA that suggested that perhaps we were looking at evidence of an intelligent cause, is the way he put it. And at the time, he didn't develop this into a full-blown theory, but it was more of an intuitive connection based on our understanding, or his understanding, and that of many people, that information is a kind of mind product. It's the sort of thing that comes from a mind or an intelligence or a conscious agent. It's not something that comes from chemistry. And anyway, I got fascinated with this connection between information and intelligence, and wondered if it was possible to formulate the case for what we later called intelligent design as a rigorous scientific hypothesis. And a year later, I found myself heading off to graduate school in Cambridge. And maybe ironically, but it was the case, I started to study very intently the works of Charles Darwin. Of course, I was interested in Darwin because of his ideas about the origin of species and so forth, but I was also interested in his work because he had pioneered a unique method of scientific reasoning that allowed scientists to investigate events in the remote past. And I realized that however we explain the origin of life, whether we invoke design or just undirected material processes, we would be trying to explain something that happened a long time ago in an event in the history of life. So the method that Darwin developed seemed to be really important to deciding whether or not you could develop a scientific case for intelligent design. And the method he developed has a name. It's called the method of multiple competing hypotheses, or it's sometimes called the method of inference to the best explanation. Mm-hmm. And that raised a key question. What does it mean to be a best explanation? And as I got deeper into the subject, I began to study one of his key mentors, which was the geologist Charles Lyell. And one day a light came on for me as I was reading Lyell's book, Principles of Geology, being an attempt to explain the former changes of the Earth's surface by reference to causes now in operation. And that's where the light went on. Because what Lyell was actually saying, as I got deeper into his work, is that the job of the historical scientist is to explain events in the remote past by reference to causes now in operation, causes that we know from our experience are capable of explaining the event in question. So here's an illustration. If you go to eastern Washington today, there's still places out in the Palouse country where there are are thin dustings of white, powdery stuff. And if you're a geologist and you don't know what happened on May 18th, 1980 when Mount St. Helens blew up, and you're looking at that white powdery stuff, you're going to use the method of Lyell and Darwin. You're going to generate multiple hypotheses. Maybe it was a flood. Maybe it was an earthquake. Maybe it was a volcanic eruption. Now, of those three hypotheses, which one is best? Well, according to Lyell's principle, the best explanation is the one that invokes a cause which we know from our experience can produce the effect we're trying to explain. So with that criterion in mind, the best explanation is clearly the volcano, because we've seen volcanoes produce white powdery stuff, and floods and earthquakes don't do that. And so that was the mode of reasoning that I learned about from studying Lyell and Darwin. And then one day I realized that applied to the question of the origin of information. And that was the key question that was fascinating me. Because I asked myself this question: what is the cause now in operation for the production of digital code? What is the cause that we know of that generates code or information? And soon after that, I came across there was something else I was reading. It was a little book that was an application of information theory or information science to the analysis of DNA. And it was written by a pioneer in this field named Henry Quasler. And he made an offhand comment, as it happens, on page 16. I remember vividly the day I came across it. And Quasler said that the creation of new information is habitually associated with conscious activity.
Key phrase.
Key phrase, because for Lyell, it's our uniform and repeated experience that teaches about cause and effect. Mm-hmm. So if something is habitually associated with conscious activity, if information is habitually associated with conscious activity, it really fulfills Lyell's dictum that what we're looking at is a cause now in operation, a cause that routinely produces the effect in question.
In fact, that's the only place we've ever seen it come
well,
from.
that was the next thing. As I began to think this through, I thought, whenever we see information and we trace it back to its source, whether we're talking about a computer program or a hieroglyphic inscription or a paragraph in a book or information embedded in a radio signal, whenever we see information and we trace it back to its ultimate source, to its ultimate cause, we always come to a mind, not a material process, so to conscious and rational activity, just as Quasler said. So I realized that his little statement here was absolutely right, and it actually formed the basis of a scientific case for intelligent design using the method of Darwin and Lyell. And so in my first book, Signature in the Cell, I developed an argument for intelligent design, self-consciously using the method of Darwin and Lyell to show that the origin of the information you needed to build the first living cell was best explained by an intelligent agent, by the activity of a designing intelligence in the history of life. But I think the same reasoning can be applied to explain this mysterious event we call the Cambrian explosion, because as we've been saying, the Cambrian explosion is not just an explosion of new biological form and structure, it's an explosion of information, both genetic information and then this higher level information that we've been calling epigenetic information. In both cases, we know of only one kind of cause that produces information, and that causes intelligence. And insofar as the Cambrian explosion is an information explosion, I think we have another clear example of an event in the history of life that is providing decisive evidence for intelligent design.
Yeah, I loved the first illustration that you had, I think, in that book, where you had a picture of a heart that was drawn on the sand next to the ocean. And it said, "I love you, Joanne." And if you came up and you're walking down the beach, you wouldn't assume that heart and that message in there was the product of water just rolling up against the sand. Okay? We immediately see a message, we've got information, and we say, someone, intelligence, created that message.
Well, we use this kind of reasoning all the time, and it's precisely because of what we know about the cause and effect structure of the world. Bill Gates has said that DNA is like a software program, but much more complex than any we've ever created. Well, we know from experience that it takes a programmer to make a software program. And we know that generally, that whenever we see information, especially when we find it in a digital form, there has always been a mind at work in producing that information. So when we find information at the foundation of life, when we see evidence of big infusions of information in the history of life, I argue that we're seeing decisive evidence of the activity of a designing intelligence, because we know of no other cause in the whole range of our experience that is sufficient to produce information in that kind of a form. And we have, in fact, as we've been talking in previous programs, we also have very strong reasons now for doubting that the Darwinian mechanism can build both the genetic and the epigenetic information necessary to build the complex animal forms that arise in the Cambrian. So we have both a negative case against Darwinism and other similar materialistic evolutionary theories. And in my book, I show that it's not just the neo-Darwinian evolutionary model that fails to account for the origin of information, but the other newer models that have been proposed as well. And on the other side, we have positive evidence, positive experience of a cause and effect pattern in the world where we see that it is a mind or an intelligent agent which invariably is responsible for the generation of information. So I think there's a very powerful case to be made for intelligent design. And the ironic thing, the somewhat mischievous thing, if you will, is that in formulating this case, we've made the case for intelligent design using the same method of the same standard method of historical scientific reasoning that Charles Darwin himself pioneered in The Origin of Species.
Yeah, you made an important statement in your book, and I want to put this up on the screen for folks. You say that just because the Cambrian explosion may exhibit some features for which intelligent design is a known cause, does not mean that intelligent design was necessarily the actual cause or the best explanation of those features. You go on to say, only if the Cambrian event and animals exhibit features for which intelligent design is the only known cause may a historical scientist make a decisive inference to a past intelligent cause. I think that's a very important statement. Explain what you're saying here.
Right, well, this is a point of logic. And when you're trying to do what scientists call retrodict, infer from clues in the present back to causes in the past, you can make a decisive inference when there's only one known cause for the effect in question. If there are many different types of causes which will all produce the same effect, then when you see the effect, it could be any one of those causes that was responsible. But in the case, for the historical scientists, the best case is when you have an effect for which there's only one cause, because then the effect will decisively indicate the cause because there's no other possibility. And what I argue in Darwin's Doubt and also in Signature in the Cell is there is only one known cause for the origin of functional information, information that performs a communication function, and that cause is intelligence. And yet that's precisely the effect that we see in life, that we have to explain in life. It's the origin of the information in the digital code in DNA, and then we've also been talking about this higher level information processing system and the epigenetic information that's involved in building animal body plans.
All right, I think we're going to show them another clip here that's going to explain not only what you're saying, but give them a little bit more evidence about why intelligent design is the best explanation to fit the evidence. Folks, I want you to watch.
As I've reflected on this over the years, I've realized that the same reasoning that applies to the origin of biological information also applies to the origin of the other key features of the Cambrian explosion.
The sudden top-down appearance of the phyla during the Cambrian explosion defies the simple to complex pattern of development that Darwin predicted.
In Darwin's picture, you'd have little differences accumulating to big differences. The top-down picture turns that on its head.
You find first you get new phyla, and then you have some variations on those themes over time. But the new form, the big differences, appear right from the beginning in the fossil record. If you consider the possibility of design, you realize that that pattern makes perfect sense, because we see in our own history of technology this same pattern of top-down appearance in new forms.
You're always working from your high-level objective to your details in order to accomplish the high-level objective.
Only intelligence can visualize a complex endpoint and bring together everything that's needed to actualize that endpoint.
The body designs evident in the Cambrian animals have continued to appear in different species throughout the history of life. Yet though these species share common body plans, they are not connected by a continuous line of intermediate material forms.
The continuity that explains that consistency of form through time is the continuity of an idea. So when we see in the fossil record the same basic idea popping up over and over again, that suggests that a mind has played a role in the origin of that form, of that body plan organization.
Design systems also display another distinctive feature. They are comprised of a network of complex and precisely organized component parts.
You could speak of these in terms of a nested hierarchy. You have the very high level parameters that specify the whole project goal. Below that, you have layers and layers of more detailed parameters that are needed in order to complete the whole project.
As an example, resistors, capacitors, and transistors are each made from specifically arranged materials. These components are then assembled to form integrated circuits. Circuits are arranged to build computers that are then arranged into networks of computers.
So at each level, there is a specificity of arrangement that's provided in turn by the intelligent designer, the engineer, that keeps the whole system working. Well, what you have in biology is something very similar.
In living systems, genes code for proteins, which are organized to form distinctive cell types, which are arranged to form tissues and organs, which are assembled into body plans, including the plans that arose during the Cambrian explosion.
We know of only one cause in the entire universe that can produce that kind of hierarchical arrangement of form and structure and information, and that cause is intelligence. This is the kind of thing that minds do, but natural undirected processes don't.
Evolution works very slowly, as Darwin saw it, with lots of failed experiments along the way. And one would expect that over millions of years, as sediment is being deposited, that you would capture some of those experiments, some of those linking groups leading to the trilobites that he knew all about.
So the absence of those forms is profoundly mysterious. But from the standpoint of intelligent design, it's not mysterious at all, because we know that intelligent agents can bring things into existence that didn't exist before because they had an idea. They had a blueprint in their minds that they realized in their creative activity. There's no need to tinker through millions of years of evolutionary history if you can actualize a plan at a discrete moment in time. And that's exactly what appears to have occurred in the Cambrian explosion.
In brief, Stephen, I think you've made a really impressive case. What do you think are the implications of this case?
Well, I think one of the first things that is striking to a lot of people when they hear this is how different intelligent design is from the way they've had it presented in the media. And we've been told over and over again that Darwinian evolution answers all the key questions, and yet we're finding in the top-level evolutionary biology journals that many leading scientists are acknowledging real problems.
So why do you think all this is so important?
Well, I think it's important first scientifically because we've heard, for 150 years that there's no evidence of design in nature, only the appearance of design. Richard Dawkins has said it well, biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. But according to the Darwinist and the modern neo-Darwinist, that appearance is an illusion. And I think what we're actually seeing is compelling evidence for real design, for the activity of an actual designing intelligence in the history of life. And that's a major reversal in 150 years of scientific thinking. But I think this discovery also has larger worldview implications, because every worldview has to answer the question, what is the thing or the entity or the process from which everything else came? And Darwinism has played an indispensable role in providing support for what's known as a naturalistic or materialistic worldview that says that everything came about as a result of undirected, unguided material processes. And if the theory of intelligent design is correct, and I think there's strong evidence for it, then I think the materialistic worldview, then I think that this evidence is posing a major challenge to the materialistic way of thinking, and that we may have scientific discoveries that have larger theistic implications that are pointing to the need for a designing intelligence that indeed has the attributes that Jews and Christians have long associated with God. And I guess we're going to be talking about some of those implications in the next program.
Yeah, and folks, I think this is where the critics come in, because they realize some of these implications. And next week we're going to devote a program to what the critics have said about this whole theory and let Dr. Meyer respond to them. It's going to be a fascinating program. I hope that you'll join us. Well, thanks for being with me today. If you enjoyed today's program and would like to watch it again or wish to view some of our other programs and topics, just go to our free John Ankerberg Show app or watch it at our website at jashow.org. Again, you may watch any of these episodes free on our John Ankerberg Show app, or you may download each episode for your personal use for only $5 an episode at our website at jashow.org. Folks, our goal is to help encourage and strengthen you in your walk with the Lord. And possibly God is speaking to you today, and you'd like to know how to become a Christian, or you'd like to pray and invite Jesus Christ to be your personal Savior. If so, just go to our website right now and click on Become a Christian, which you'll find at the top of our home page. There we will tell you how you can pray and ask the Lord Jesus Christ to be your Savior from sin, and how you can know Him and experience Him personally. We're glad that you have chosen to watch our program today, and hope to see you next week as we present another program intended to encourage and inform you as you walk with the Lord each day. Goodbye, God bless you. I'll see you next week. Next week on the John Ankerberg Show.
Well, I do have a lot of conversations with young scientists, grad students, students in their undergraduate years, and if they're skeptical of Darwinism, or if they have a religious faith, if they are theists of some kind, Jews, Christians, other, they will often feel that that they're the odd man out in their science classes. Many professors hold a naturalistic or materialistic worldview. The professors often think and will say openly that science properly understood supports such a worldview, or many of them are openly atheistic. We'll say, like Richard Dawkins believes that the science properly understood supports an atheistic perspective. And so students in classes with professors who are overtly opposed to any kind of theistic belief will often feel kind of intimidated and feel like maybe they're the person that didn't get the memo. And I think actually that this is a tremendous time to be going into science if you're interested in the big questions, and in particular if you have a theistic perspective, because I think we're seeing evidence of design not only in biology but also in physics and in cosmology. And I think that we often get the opposite perspective. You have the science popularizers are going to say, science supports the new atheism, or science makes belief in God untenable, or things like that. But when you dig into the evidence, I think there's a powerful case for intelligent design.
Now, possibly, God is speaking to you today. And if you would like to have someone pray with you, or you have a question you would like to ask, there's a phone number on your screen right now that you may call. Call that number, and someone will be happy to pray with you. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you'll join me again at the same time next week. And to learn how to start a relationship with Jesus Christ, go to our website at jashow.org and click on Pray to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior.